The champagne glass shattered against marble, spraying $50,000 worth of vintage across the floor as Naomi Brooks stood frozen in the doorway. She had come to celebrate her inheritance, the billions Henry Calloway had left her. Instead, she walked into her own funeral, complete with a casket and her daughter's terrified screams echoing from somewhere in the mansion's dark corridors. Welcome to Stories by Jason. If you're settled in and ready for a good story, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I've got another exciting story coming your way tomorrow, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. Thank you so much for the love and support. You're truly appreciated, and I'm so grateful to have you here with me. The headlights cut through the rain like accusations, and Naomi Brooks felt the first whisper of wrongness crawl up her spine. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the diner should have been empty except for old Mike nursing his third coffee and Sheila counting register receipts in the back. Instead, a black Mercedes idled at the curb, too expensive, too clean, too deliberate for this part of town where even the streetlights had given up pretending to work. Naomi's hands were wrist-deep in dishwater, her feet screaming from another double shift, when the door opened. The man who entered wasn't a customer. He moved like someone who'd never had to ask permission for anything, his charcoal suit probably worth more than Naomi made in 6 months. Behind him, rain poured like the sky was mourning something it hadn't bothered to tell anyone about yet. Naomi Brooks. His voice was measured, professional, the kind that delivered bad news for a living. Her stomach dropped. I don't know what this is about, but I can't help you. I'm working. Not anymore, he said quietly, and something in his tone made the whole diner go silent. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to dim, as if they too understood the weight of what was coming. My name is Richard Moss. I'm the chief executor of Henry Calloway's estate. The name hit her like cold water. Henry. The old man who'd stumbled into the diner 3 weeks ago, soaked and shaking, looking like the city had chewed him up and spit him out. The one she'd fed on her own dime because he'd reminded her of her father, before he died, before medical bills had turned their lives into a math problem with no good solution. Is Henry okay? Naomi asked, though she already knew. You don't send lawyers in Mercedes to deliver good news. Mr. Calloway passed away 4 days ago, Richard said, and Naomi felt something crack in her chest. Complications from stage 4 pancreatic cancer. He asked me to find you immediately after his death. Ms. Brooks, we need to talk, privately. Sheila emerged from the back, reading the room with the same instinct that had kept her alive through 3 divorces and 2 bankruptcies. Take your break, Naomi. Take the whole damn night if you need to. 15 minutes later, Naomi sat in a booth she'd cleaned 1,000 times, watching Richard Moss pull documents from a leather briefcase that probably cost more than her car. Maya, her 8-year-old daughter, was at her grandmother's for the night, thank God, because whatever this was, Naomi could feel it gathering like a storm. 3 weeks ago, Richard began, Henry Calloway walked into this diner dressed as a homeless man. Do you remember what happened? I gave him soup, Naomi said simply. Bread, coffee. He looked like he needed it more than I needed the $6 it would have cost. He tried to pay you $5, Richard continued. You refused. He needed it more than I did. Richard looked at her for a long moment and Naomi couldn't read his expression. Finally, he slid a document across the table. Henry Calloway was worth $4.7 billion. He owned Sterling Holdings, one of the largest private equity firms in the country. Real estate, technology, pharmaceuticals, manufacturing. His children, Marcus and Alina, were set to inherit everything. Richard paused. Until you gave him soup. Naomi's laugh came out strangled. What are you talking about? Ms. Brooks, Henry spent the last month of his life disguising himself, testing people. He visited over 30 establishments, hotels, restaurants, private clubs, all while dressed as someone society had decided didn't matter. He was thrown out of every single one, except here, except by you. Richard's voice softened. That night changed everything. Henry rewrote his will. He left his entire estate to you. The words didn't make sense. They couldn't. Naomi stared at the document, at her own name printed in stark black ink, and felt reality tilt sideways. That's insane, she whispered. I can't, I'm a waitress. I have a daughter in public school and medical debt I'll be paying until I die. People like me don't get billions of dollars for being decent. Henry believed otherwise, Richard said. But there's something else you need to know. Marcus and Alina Calloway filed emergency legal injunctions 2 hours after the will was read. They're claiming undue influence, mental incompetence, fraud. They've hired 3 law firms and a team of private investigators. They're coming for you, Ms. Brooks, and they're coming hard. Naomi's phone buzzed. A text from her mother. Maya's fine, sleeping. Everything okay? Everything was not okay. They can't take this to court and win, Naomi said, hearing the desperate hope in her own voice. Henry was in his right mind. You said so yourself. Legally, the will is airtight, Richard confirmed. Henry made sure of that. He recorded video testimony. He had 3 independent psychiatric evaluations. He anticipated every challenge. The lawyer's expression darkened. But Ms. Brooks, people with billions of dollars don't always fight in courtrooms, especially not people like Marcus and Alina. What does that mean? Richard leaned forward, and Naomi saw something in his eyes that terrified her more than any lawsuit could. Genuine fear. It means that 16 hours ago someone tried to access your daughter's school records. It means that this morning a man was seen photographing your apartment building. It means that when I ran your background this afternoon, standard procedure for an estate this size, I found that someone else had already done it. Twice. With forensic-level detail. His voice dropped. Henry gave you an empire, Ms. Brooks, but his children will burn the world down before they let you keep it. The diner suddenly felt too small, too exposed. Outside, the Mercedes waited like a promise or a threat. Naomi couldn't tell which. What do I do? She asked, adding how small her voice sounded. Richard pulled out a phone, not his regular one Naomi noticed, but a second device from an interior pocket. First, you come with me, tonight, now. Henry anticipated this scenario. He left instructions, resources, protection. He met her eyes. But you need to understand something. The moment you accept this inheritance, your life as you know it is over. Every choice you make from this point forward will be scrutinized, weaponized, twisted. They will try to prove you manipulated him, seduced him, coerced him. They will dig up every mistake you've ever made and broadcast it to the world. I didn't manipulate anyone, Naomi said fiercely. I gave a cold man some soup. I know, Richard said gently. Henry knew, but the truth has never stopped powerful people from destroying those who threaten them. Naomi thought of Maya, asleep at her grandmother's, unaware that her mother's kindness had just painted a target on both their backs. She thought of Henry's shaking hands wrapped around that coffee mug, the way he'd looked at her like she'd given him something more valuable than warmth. She thought about the $5 bill she'd pressed back into his palm, the one that had somehow multiplied into billions. What would Henry want me to do? She asked. Richard's smile was sad. He'd want you to fight. He believed you had something his children never learned, the strength to do the right thing when it costs you everything. Naomi Brooks stood up, her waitress uniform still damp with dishwater, her feet still aching, her whole world cracking open like an egg revealing something she couldn't yet name. Then I guess we'd better get started, she said. She didn't know that across town, in a penthouse office with floor-to-ceiling views of a city that belonged to people like them, Marcus and Alina Calloway were making phone calls to men who solved problems that courts couldn't touch. She didn't know that Maya's safety had already been calculated, priced, and factored into a plan that made kidnapping look like a business expense. She didn't know that kindness, the thing her mother had taught her mattered most, was about to become the most dangerous decision of her life. But she would learn. And when she did, the empire Henry Calloway built on ruthlessness would discover what happened when you pushed someone who had nothing left to lose and everything worth fighting for. The safe house smelled like expensive nothing, the kind of sterile, climate-controlled air that rich people breathed without ever noticing they were suffocating. Naomi stood in the marble entryway of what Richard called secure property, watching him punch codes into security systems that probably cost more than her childhood home. This was Henry's, Richard explained, gesturing to the sprawling penthouse that occupied the entire 40th floor of a building Naomi had cleaned once, years ago, when she'd worked for a janitorial company between waitressing gigs. He kept it off the books. Marcus and Alina don't know it exists. Naomi barely heard him. Her phone was pressed to her ear for the 7th time in 20 minutes, listening to her mother's voicemail. You've reached Patricia. Leave a message. She'd left 6 already. She's not answering, Naomi said, and the panic in her voice made it sound foreign, like someone else was speaking through her mouth. Richard's expression tightened. When did you last speak with her? An hour ago, right before we left the diner. She said Maya was asleep, that everything was fine. Naomi's hands shook as she dialed again. Mom always answers, always, even at 2 a.m., even when she's mad at me. The phone rang once, twice. On the third ring, someone picked up. But it wasn't her mother. Ms. Brooks. The voice was male, calm, almost bored. Thank you for calling, we've been waiting. Ice flooded Naomi's veins. Who is this? Where's my mother? Where's Maya? Your daughter is safe, the man said, and Naomi heard something in the background. A whimper, young and terrified, that sounded exactly like the noise Maya made when she had nightmares. For now. Whether she stays that way depends entirely on you. Richard was already moving, pulling out his phone, but Naomi grabbed his wrist. The man on the other end would hear. She put her call on speaker. What do you want? Naomi asked, though she already knew. Mr. Marcus Calloway would like to extend an invitation, the voice continued, professional as a restaurant reservation. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., his lawyer's office. You'll be presented with documents transferring your inheritance back to the Calloway family. You'll sign them. Then you'll receive your daughter back, unharmed, along with a very generous settlement, shall we say, $5 million, more than you'd make in 10 lifetimes. You kidnapped my child, Naomi said, and the words felt like glass in her throat. We're protecting Mr. Calloway's rightful inheritance from someone who clearly manipulated a sick, elderly man, the voice corrected. The story writes itself, Ms. Brooks. Poor single mother, drowning in debt, sees an opportunity and exploits a vulnerable billionaire. It's almost Shakespearean. I gave him soup, Naomi whispered. You saw a mark, the voice countered. But this doesn't have to get ugly. Sign the papers, take the money, raise your daughter, everyone wins. Except Henry, Naomi said, finding something sharp and solid beneath her terror. Except what he wanted. The man sighed, as if Naomi was being unreasonably difficult about something simple. Ms. Brooks, let me be clear. If you involve the police, we'll know within minutes. If you don't show up tomorrow, we'll know immediately. If you try to run, we'll find you. And if you test our patience, your daughter will learn what happens when people forget their place in the world. He paused. Are we understood? Naomi looked at Richard, at the security systems, at the marble floors of a safe house that hadn't kept her safe at all. I'll be there, she said. Excellent, 9 a.m. Don't be late, someone will be watching. The line went dead. For 30 seconds, neither Naomi nor Richard moved. Then Naomi's knees gave out, and she collapsed onto the floor, actual Carrara marble, probably worth more per square foot than her mother's entire house, and screamed into her hands until her throat went raw. Richard let her. He stood silent, phone already active, texting people Naomi couldn't see. When she finally looked up, eyes burning, Richard crouched beside her. We're going to get her back, he said quietly. How? Naomi's voice cracked. They have her. They have my mother. The police can't help. These people own half the city. What am I supposed to do, Richard? What would Henry do? Richard studied her for a long moment. Then he made a decision that would either save them or destroy them. Henry, he said slowly, prepared for this exact scenario. He pulled out a tablet, unlocked it with his thumbprint, and showed Naomi a video file dated 3 weeks earlier. Henry Calloway's face filled the screen, gaunt, exhausted but clear-eyed and focused. Naomi, Henry's recorded voice began, and hearing him again made Naomi's chest constrict. If you're watching this, then Richard believes you're in immediate danger, probably from my children. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for putting this burden on you, but I need you to listen very carefully. On screen, Henry leaned forward, and Naomi saw the same intensity that must have built an empire. Marcus and Alina are cowards, Henry continued. Bullies, they've never had to fight for anything, so they fight dirty when challenged. They'll threaten you, intimidate you. They'll find your weakness and exploit it without hesitation. His expression hardened. But I spent 40 years building an empire, Naomi. I didn't do it alone, and I didn't leave you defenseless. The video shifted to a document, organizational charts, names, photographs. These people, Henry said, are the ones who actually run Sterling Holdings, not Marcus and Alina. These are the directors, the COOs, the security chiefs, the auditors who have been documenting my children's embezzlement for the past 5 years. His smile was grim. I've been planning this for a long time. Most of them are loyal to me, not my bloodline. They're waiting for your call. The screen showed another face, a woman in her 60s, stern and capable looking. Judith Chen, Henry introduced, former CIA field operations. She's been heading my personal security for 12 years. Marcus doesn't even know she exists. She has a team, resources. She's been briefed on every potential scenario, including kidnapping. Henry's eyes seemed to look directly at Naomi through the screen. You're not alone. You were never going to be alone, but you have to be willing to fight back. The video paused. Richard set the tablet down. Judith is already en route. She'll be here in 90 minutes. She has tactical options. Tactical options, Naomi repeated numbly. For retrieving Maya safely while simultaneously destroying Marcus and Alina's ability to threaten you ever again. Richard's voice was steady. But Naomi, you need to understand what that means. This isn't just signing papers and walking away. If we do this, if we fight, we're going to war with people who have infinite resources and zero conscience. It will be public, vicious. They'll drag you through media hell. They'll paint you as everything from a gold digger to a child abuser. Your entire life will be dissected. Naomi thought about Maya's whimper on the phone. She thought about her mother, who'd raised her alone after her father died, who'd taught her that kindness wasn't weakness. She thought about Henry Calloway, dying of cancer, rewriting his will because a tired waitress had treated him like a human being. What would the tactical option look like? She asked. Richard pulled up another file. Marcus and Alina aren't smart enough to run this operation themselves. They hired criminals, a crew that specializes in corporate intimidation. Judith's team has been tracking them since the will reading. We know where they're operating from. We know their communication protocols. We know they're not expecting resistance. He met her eyes. We can get Maya out, tonight. But it requires precision, coordination, and accepting that after this, there's no going back to normal. Normal? Naomi laughed, bitter and sharp. My daughter is being held hostage because I gave someone soup. Normal died the second that lawyer walked into my diner. Then what do you want to do? Naomi stood, her legs steadier now, her fear transforming into something colder and more focused. I want my daughter back, she said. I want Marcus and Alina in handcuffs, and I want to honor what Henry believed about me, that I'm strong enough to do the right thing even when it costs me everything. Richard nodded slowly. Then we'd better make some calls. 73 minutes later. Judith Chen walked through the door like she'd walked through 1,000 doors before. Controlled, efficient, projecting the quiet confidence of someone who'd extracted hostages from war zones and knew exactly how dangerous comfort could make you. She was 62, 5'4", and looked like she could disassemble a grown man in under 30 seconds. Ms. Brooks, she said, shaking Naomi's hand with a grip that could crack walnuts. Henry spoke very highly of you. He barely knew me, Naomi said. He knew enough. Judith opened a tactical case, revealing equipment Naomi recognized from movies but had never imagined seeing in real life. Here's what we know. Your daughter and mother are being held in a warehouse in Red Hook, industrial area, minimal police presence. The crew consists of 4 men, ex-military contractors, competent but overconfident. They're expecting you to fold. They're not expecting us. She pulled up thermal imaging on a laptop. We have eyes on the location. 2 guards outside, 2 inside with the hostages. Standard rotation every 4 hours. Next shift change is in 90 minutes. Judith looked at Naomi. We can extract them then. Clean, fast, minimal risk to your family. And Marcus and Alina, Naomi asked. Judith's smile was sharp enough to cut. We make this loud enough that they can't hide their involvement. We document everything, record the extraction, get the hostages to safety while simultaneously notifying FBI, SEC, and every media outlet that matters. She paused. Henry built leverage over the years, evidence of Marcus and Alina's embezzlement, fraud, securities violations. He never used it because they were his children. But you're not bound by that sentimentality. Naomi felt something settle in her chest. Not peace exactly, but clarity. What do you need from me? Stay here, stay safe. Let us do what we're trained to do. Judith began checking weapons with the casual efficiency of someone who'd done it 10,000 times. When this is over, you're going to have a choice. You can take the settlement Marcus offered, walk away, raise your daughter in peace. Or you can fight for what Henry wanted, use this empire to prove that kindness isn't weakness, that people like you belong in power just as much as people like them. That's not really a choice, Naomi said quietly. No, Judith agreed. I didn't think it would be. Henry was good at reading people. 45 minutes later, Naomi watched through laptop feeds as Judith's team moved through darkness like smoke, silent, coordinated, lethal in their precision. She saw her mother first, bound to a chair but conscious, alert. Then Maya, crying but unharmed, curled against her grandmother. The extraction took 4 minutes. The arrests took longer. By dawn, Marcus and Alina Calloway were in federal custody. The warehouse crew had flipped immediately, providing detailed testimony about who hired them and why. Every news station in the city was running footage of the rescue operation, of Maya reunited with her mother, of FBI agents leading the Calloway siblings out in handcuffs. The headlines wrote themselves: Billionaire heirs kidnap child to steal inheritance. Waitress fights empire wins. Naomi held Maya through it all, her daughter shaking, traumatized, but alive, and felt the weight of what she'd inherited finally settle onto her shoulders. This was the empire Henry Calloway had built. This was the power he'd believed she deserved. And these were the enemies who would never stop coming, even from prison cells, even in defeat, because people who'd had everything and lost it to someone they considered beneath them never forgot. But neither would Naomi. And that, she was learning, made all the difference. The courtroom smelled like old wood and broken futures. Naomi Brooks sat in the front row, Maya pressed against her side, watching Marcus and Alina Calloway face federal charges that would consume the rest of their lives. Conspiracy, kidnapping, extortion, wire fraud. The list went on, each count another nail in a coffin they'd built themselves. Marcus wore an orange jumpsuit that clashed with his tan. Even in custody, he maintained that entitled posture, chin up, shoulders back, as if the universe had made a clerical error that would soon be corrected. When his eyes found Naomi across the courtroom, the hatred in them was pure and incandescent. Alina, sitting beside her brother, had aged a decade in 5 days. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced with prison-issued cotton that hung on her like shame. She'd cried during arraignment, begging the judge to understand she'd never meant for things to go this far, that it was all Marcus's idea. The performance might have worked on someone who hadn't seen the text messages Judith's team had recovered. Alina coordinating the kidnapping, selecting the crew, transferring payment from an offshore account she'd spent years hiding from her father. The defendants will rise, the judge said, and Naomi felt Maya's hand tighten in hers. Bail was denied. Both defendants deemed flight risks with the resources and connections to disappear. The prosecution had presented overwhelming evidence: video, audio, financial records, and testimony from the 4 contractors who decided federal prison was preferable to whatever Marcus and Alina might do to ensure their silence. As marshals led them away, Marcus stopped, turned, locked eyes with Naomi one final time. "You destroyed this family," he said, loud enough to echo through the chamber. "No," Naomi replied, quiet but clear. "Your father did, when he chose character over blood." Marcus flinched like she'd struck him. Then he was gone, the doors closing behind him with the finality of a tomb. Richard Moss appeared at Naomi's elbow. "The Sterling Holdings board is meeting in an hour. They're expecting you." Naomi's stomach twisted. "I'm not ready." "You survived a kidnapping and brought down 2 of the most powerful people in the city," Richard said gently. "You're ready." The Sterling Holdings boardroom occupied the 63rd floor of a glass tower that seemed to scrape the bottom of heaven. Naomi had cleaned this building once, emptying trash cans in offices where people made more per hour than she made per month. Now she sat at the head of a table that could comfortably seat 20, surrounded by executives whose collective net worth could fund a small nation. They stared at her with varying degrees of curiosity, skepticism, and calculation. Judith stood against the wall, subtle but present, a reminder that Naomi didn't walk into this room defenseless. "Ms. Brooks," began an older man with silver hair and a voice like gravel. "I'm Charles Whitmore, Chief Operating Officer. On behalf of the board, I want to express our sympathy for what you've endured." "Sympathy won't bring back the week my daughter spent terrified," Naomi said, and watched several executives shift uncomfortably. "But thank you. We've prepared transition materials." A woman with sharp eyes and sharper suit interjected. "Leadership structures, operational oversight, strategic priorities. Sterling Holdings is a complex organization with diversified assets across multiple sectors. We understand you have no business experience, so we've outlined a path forward that would allow you to maintain ownership while delegating day-to-day operations to those with expertise." Translation: sit in your mansion, collect dividends, let us run everything. Naomi recognized the play. Henry had warned her about it in another video she'd watched at 3 a.m. while Maya slept fitfully in the next room. "They'll try to make you feel incompetent," he'd said. "They'll use words you don't know and processes you haven't studied. They'll smile and nod and manage you right out of any real power. Don't let them." "I appreciate the materials," Naomi said. "I'll review them, but first I have questions, starting with pharmaceuticals." Charles Whitmore blinked. "I'm sorry." "Sterling Holdings owns a 47% stake in Meridian Pharma," Naomi said, reading from notes Judith had helped her compile. "Meridian produces insulin. Current retail price is $420 per vial. Production cost is roughly $12. Can someone explain why we're marking up life-saving medication by 3,500%? Silence crashed through the room like a wave. "That's industry standard," someone finally offered. "Industry standard is why people are dying," Naomi countered. "My daughter has asthma. I know what it's like to choose between medication and rent. I know what it's like to ration doses because you can't afford refills. Is there anyone in this room who's had to make that choice?" More silence. "Here's what's going to happen," Naomi said, feeling something powerful and terrifying unfurl in her chest. "We're going to restructure Meridian's pricing. Insulin will be sold at cost plus reasonable profit, say 20%. That's still $96 per vial less than current rates." "That would cost us millions in quarterly earnings," Charles protested. "Good," Naomi said, "because I'm not interested in making money from people suffering." Next item: real estate. Sterling owns 17 apartment buildings in low-income neighborhoods. Rent increases averaged 23% annually for the past 4 years, well above inflation. Eviction rates are up 40%. Can someone explain to me how displacing poor families aligns with anything resembling ethics? The sharp-eyed woman spoke carefully. "Those properties were underperforming assets. Market rate adjustments were necessary to maximize return on investment." "Underperforming," Naomi repeated. "That's a nice way of saying you decided people's homes were worth less than profit margins." She pulled out another document. "Starting next quarter, rent increases are capped at 3% annually. Any tenant currently in arrears due to medical or emergency expenses gets a hardship review and payment plan options. Evictions require board approval." "Ms. Brooks," Charles said, and now his voice carried an edge, "with all due respect, this company has a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. What you're proposing would tank our stock price." "Then we need different shareholders," Naomi said simply. The room erupted. Voices overlapping, executives demanding clarification, someone threatening resignation. Richard stood. "Gentlemen, ladies, Ms. Brooks controls 73% of Sterling Holdings. She can fire every person in this room and replace you by lunch. I suggest you listen." The chaos settled into shocked quiet. Naomi took a breath. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't manipulate anyone or scheme my way into power. I gave a cold man some soup because it was the right thing to do, and now I have the resources to do a lot of right things even when they're not profitable." She looked each person in the eye. "Henry Callaway built this empire on ruthlessness. I'm going to rebuild it on something different. If that doesn't align with your values, you're free to leave. But if you stay, we do this my way." Charles Whitmore studied her for a long moment. Then slowly he smiled. "Henry said you had spine. I didn't believe him until now." He extended his hand. "I'm in. Let's turn this ship around." One by one, the others followed. Not everyone, 3 executives walked out within the hour, but enough to matter. 6 months later, Naomi stood in that same boardroom, watching news coverage of Meridian Pharma's price restructuring. Diabetes advocacy groups were calling it revolutionary. Other pharmaceutical companies were calling it reckless. Wall Street was calling it both. Sterling Holdings stock had dropped 18%. Naomi had never slept better. Maya was in therapy processing trauma that no 8-year-old should carry, but she was healing. She'd started drawing again, bright, hopeful pictures that Naomi pinned to the fridge in their new apartment. Not a mansion, not a penthouse, a modest 3-bedroom in a neighborhood where people still looked out for each other. Richard had warned her about optics. People will say you're not taking this seriously if you don't live like a billionaire. Let them talk, Naomi had replied. I didn't become a billionaire to forget who I was. The Sterling Foundation launched that month, focused on medical debt relief, affordable housing, and educational opportunities for kids who looked like Maya and grew up where Naomi had grown up. Every initiative was personal, born from the life she'd lived before a $5 bill changed everything. Marcus and Alina Calloway were sentenced to 15 and 12 years respectively. Their appeals were denied. Their assets, frozen and seized, would spend years tied up in litigation that no longer included Naomi's name. Sometimes, late at night, Naomi wondered what Henry would think, if he'd be proud or disappointed, if she was honoring his legacy or destroying it. Then she'd remember his words from that final video. Legacy isn't what you leave behind, it's what you change while you're here. And she'd get back to work. 2 years after the reading of Henry Calloway's will, Naomi Brooks stood in the diner where everything had started, watching morning light filter through windows she used to clean between shifts. The place looked different now. Fresh paint, new booths, equipment that actually worked. Naomi had bought the building 6 months ago not to own it but to save it. The landlord had been planning demolition for luxury condos. Now it was a community space. Still a diner, but also a hub for job training, legal aid, and free meals for anyone who needed them. A small brass plaque near the entrance read, "In memory of Henry Calloway, who knew the value of kindness." Maya, now 10 years old and taller than seemed possible, slid into the booth across from her mother. "Grandma says you're on TV again." Naomi groaned. "What did I do this time?" "Something about affordable housing, and the senator is mad." Maya sipped her hot chocolate free, like everything else in the diner for people who couldn't pay. "Why is he always mad at you?" "Because I'm doing things differently than he thinks they should be done," Naomi explained. "Some people believe money should make more money. I believe money should help people." "Dad would have liked that," Maya said quietly. Naomi's ex-husband had died 3 years ago, long before Henry, before Billions, when they'd been 2 broke kids trying to make it work. He'd been Maya's father for 6 short years, and though things between them hadn't lasted, he'd been kind. That counted for something. "Yeah," Naomi agreed, "he would have." Richard Moss appeared at the entrance, briefcase in hand. He'd become more than a lawyer, something like a friend, though Naomi suspected he still reported every major decision to Henry's ghost. "Board meeting in 2 hours, he reminded her. "Also, Forbes wants an interview about the wage increases." Last month, Naomi had announced that every Sterling Holdings employee, from executives to janitors, would receive a living wage minimum of $25 per hour. The business press had declared her insane. Workers' rights groups had built shrines. Shareholders had complained until Naomi reminded them she controlled 73% of the company, and their complaints were noted but irrelevant. "Tell Forbes I'll think about it," Naomi said, after the board meeting. She'd learned to prioritize, to delegate, to trust people like Judith and Charles and the growing team of executives who believed in what she was building. She'd also learned that power was a responsibility that never slept, that every decision affected lives she'd never meet, and that the only way to survive it was to stay anchored to the person she'd been before money tried to change her. As Richard left, Sheila emerged from the kitchen, still working, despite Naomi's repeated offers of retirement with full pension. "Another day, another billionaire in my diner," Sheila said, sliding a plate of eggs in front of Naomi. "You gonna eat like a regular person, or should I plate this with gold leaf?" Naomi laughed. "Regular's fine." "Good, because you're still terrible at fancy." It was true. Naomi had attended galas and sat through charity dinners where a single meal cost more than she used to make in a week. She'd learned to navigate those spaces, to speak their language when necessary. But she never felt more herself than here, in the diner where everything started, surrounded by people who remembered her as Naomi the waitress, not Naomi the billionaire. Her phone buzzed. A text from Judith, perimeter clear, no threats detected, you're good. Even now, 2 years later, security remained tight. Marcus and Alina were in prison, but their supporters, business partners, socialites, people who'd benefited from the old Callaway empire, still existed. Threats came sporadically. Anonymous messages, legal challenges, a suspicious package that turned out to be glitter and hate mail. Naomi had learned to live with it. The cost of choosing right over easy. Maya finished her hot chocolate and pulled out homework, a report on inspirational figures. I'm writing about you, she announced. Baby, pick someone more interesting. Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman, anyone. You gave away billions to help people, Maya countered. That's pretty cool. I didn't give it away. I'm using it differently. Same thing. Maya's eyes, so much like her father's, held a wisdom that broke Naomi's heart. Grandma says you're the strongest person she knows. Naomi thought about strength. About the night Maya was taken, when terror had nearly consumed her. About boardrooms where men twice her age had tried to intimidate her into silence. About the constant pressure to prove she deserved what Henry had given her. Strength wasn't fearlessness. It was choosing to move forward when every instinct screamed to run. Grandma's biased, Naomi said, but she smiled. That afternoon, the Sterling Holdings board meeting unfolded with its usual controlled chaos. Quarterly earnings were down again, predictable given Naomi's restructuring, but employee satisfaction was at an all-time high. Turnover had dropped 63%. Productivity was up. The company was bleeding profit margins but gaining something more valuable, a reputation as an employer that actually cared. We're getting applications from top talent, Charles reported. People who want to work somewhere that aligns with their values. It's unprecedented. It's also not sustainable if we keep losing money, countered a newer board member, still adjusting to Naomi's philosophy. Define sustainable, Naomi said. Because from where I'm sitting, a system that requires people to suffer so shareholders can profit isn't sustainable. It's extraction disguised as economics. The debate continued, familiar territory now. Naomi had learned to hold her ground without apologizing, to listen without capitulating, to balance idealism with pragmatism in ways Henry probably never imagined. After the meeting, Judith pulled her aside. There's something you should know, the security chief said quietly. We've been monitoring Marcus Callaway's communications from prison. He's been writing letters to journalists, former employees, anyone who will listen, building a narrative that you seduced and manipulated his father. Naomi's stomach tightened. Can he do damage from prison? Normally, no, but there's a documentary filmmaker who's interested. Marcus is offering exclusive access prison interviews, the real story of the Callaway fortune. Judith's expression was grim. It's going to be ugly, accusations, conspiracy theories. They'll paint you as a calculated opportunist. Let them, Naomi said, surprising herself with the calm she felt. I know the truth. The people who matter know the truth. Anyone who believes I manipulated a billionaire I'd never met probably wasn't going to support what we're doing anyway. You're sure? Naomi thought of Henry's video testimonies, his psychiatric evaluations, his clear, competent explanation of why he chose her. I'm sure. The truth has a way of surviving lies, eventually. That evening, back at her modest apartment, Naomi found Maya asleep on the couch, homework scattered around her. The report about inspirational figures lay open, filled with Maya's careful handwriting. My mom is inspiring because she didn't change who she was when she got rich. She could have bought mansions and yachts and been like all the other billionaires. But instead she remembered what it was like to be poor. She remembered what it felt like when people were mean to you because you didn't have money. And she decided to use her money to make sure other people didn't feel that way. I think that's what real strength is. Not forgetting where you came from. Not becoming mean just because you can. My mom could have been like the bad people who tried to hurt us, but she chose to be kind instead. That's why she's my hero. Naomi's vision blurred. She carefully moved Maya to her bedroom, tucking her in with the stuffed bear that had survived poverty, terror, and transformation. In the quiet of her living room, Naomi pulled out something she kept in a locked drawer, the $5 bill, the one Henry had tried to give her that rainy night, the one she'd pressed back into his palm. Richard had recovered it from Henry's personal effects after his death. He kept it in his wallet, the lawyer had explained, like a reminder. Now Naomi kept it as one too. She thought about the impossibility of her life, about a chance encounter that had rewritten destiny, about the terrifying responsibility of having power and the even more terrifying responsibility of using it right. She thought about Henry Calloway, a man she'd known for maybe 30 minutes total, who'd somehow seen in her what his own children lacked. "I hope I'm making you proud," she whispered to the empty room. The city lights glittered beyond her window, beautiful and indifferent. Somewhere out there, people were sleeping in the affordable housing Sterling Holdings now prioritized. Somewhere, a diabetic was filling a prescription they could finally afford. Somewhere, employees were going home to families with wages that actually paid the bills. None of it was perfect, none of it would ever be enough. But it was something, and something Naomi had learned was how you changed the world, one choice, one person, one act of decency at a time. The $5 bill sat on her coffee table, wrinkled and ordinary and priceless. Just like kindness. Just like the woman who'd given it back and received an empire in return. So let me ask you something. What would you have done in Naomi's position? Would you have signed those papers when your daughter's life was on the line? Would you have taken the $5 million and walked away? Or would you have fought back against people with infinite resources and zero conscience? Because here's what this story really reveals. The powerful will always test the powerless, and the moment you stand up to them, the moment you refuse to play by their rules, everything changes. Naomi didn't just inherit money. She inherited a choice, to become what the system expected or to stay who she'd always been. And that choice, that's the same one we face every single day. Do we let bullies win because fighting back is hard? Do we stay silent when we see injustice because speaking up has consequences? Or do we remember that the smallest act of courage, the simplest moment of kindness, can literally reshape empires? This story made me think about every time I've been tested, every time someone powerful tried to make me feel small, every time I had to choose between what was easy and what was right. Naomi reminds us that we're not powerless. We just forget we have power until we're forced to use it. If this story fired you up, if it made you angry at people like Marcus and Alina, who think they can buy their way out of consequences, or if it restored even a little bit of your faith that good people can win, I need you to do something for me right now. Smash that like button if you're tired of seeing greed win and you believe kindness still matters. Drop a comment telling me what you would have done. Would you have fought, or would you have walked away? I want to hear your story, because your experience matters just as much as Naomi's. And here's the big one. Subscribe and hit that notification bell, because I'm bringing you more stories like this every single week. Stories about regular people who stood up to power. Stories about justice that actually gets served. Stories that prove the system can be beaten if you're brave enough to try. We're building a community here of people who refuse to accept that might makes right. People who believe that character matters more than cash, that integrity beats inheritance every single time. So comment "Justice served" if this story hit you right in the chest. Let's flood this comment section with proof that there are still people out there who believe in doing the right thing, even when it costs everything. Because here's the truth they don't want you to know. You have more power than you think. You just have to be willing to use it. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, join this family. And never, ever let anyone tell you that kindness is weakness. Let's go.